Hi. Participant observation is a method first developed and most commonly associated with the field of anthropology. However, this research method is increasingly employed across the social sciences, including by human geographers. It is a method that is especially relevant for learning about how people interact with each other and with their environment. There are different theories and perspectives, of course, but participant observation basically implies some combination of participating in normal social interaction within a particular context and observing aspects of that interaction and of the context itself. The anthropologist who settles into a remote village, participating in and observing village life in order to better understand the social group, is perhaps a typical perception of participant observation. However, the method can be employed in diverse contexts and with different research questions in mind. For example, how do people living in a specific neighborhood relate to changing urban spaces, and how does this inform their transportation choices? Or, on the other hand, how do immigrant healthcare workers experience and deal with discrimination in the workplace? Or, how do farmers in a specific area perceive, experience, and deal with changing environmental conditions that affect their crops? With research questions like these, it is easy to see that actually being there in the context under study, whether it's a neighborhood, a workplace, or a farm, while observing how people interact with each other and with their environment, and engaging in discussions about these topics can have distinct advantages over other methods. As human geographers have a particular interest in people's relationship to spaces and places, conducting research in the context of interest can offer some clear advantages over simply talking about them. Other qualitative research methods, such as interviews and focus groups, typically occur within an artificial context. The physical setting and social interaction are structured by the researcher. In the case of participant observation, in contrast, the researcher must be ready to go out into naturally occurring social contexts. Your position with respect to the social group being studied will vary depending on the social-cultural distance between you and that group, and on the objectives of your research. There are perhaps two particularly important points to be aware of when using the participant observation research method. First is to recognize that your experience of or interpretation of a place or activity is almost certainly different from how the social group you are studying experiences them. This is sometimes referred to as the difference between an emic versus etic, or insider versus outsider perspective or description. The researcher is typically an outsider and will probably never become an insider, nor is this necessarily a desirable objective. Although the goal of participant observation may be to get a faint glimpse of reality from the insider's point of view, being able to communicate these findings to other outsiders requires maintaining a certain degree of objectivity and distance. To begin to anticipate expected social behavior and understand the meaning that participants give to it requires time and growing familiarity with the context. It involves a combination of observing, participating, and talking with people in the context to attempt to understand, in the words of the anthropologist Clifford Geertz, what the devil they think they are up to. Secondly, it is important to keep in mind how your presence in the context affects what occurs. While the researcher does not directly structure social interaction as in the case of an interview, still the researcher must be aware of the ways that his or her presence and behaviors affect social interaction in a particular setting. Since it is not generally possible, or may not even be ethical, to observe social interaction without the knowledge of participants, we must always assume that observation may have some effect on what can be observed. Often being honest, clear, and forthcoming about the research objectives to research participants is the best way to make them feel the most comfortable as possible. Gaining the trust of the participants and learning to act naturally will take time. In any case, adopting a reflexive attitude is particularly important when using the participant observation research method. The researcher must reflect on how their own presence may have shaped social interaction and ultimately the research results. On the other hand, the researcher must also constantly interrogate the degree to which the results and interpretations reflect the meaning the social group ascribes to the phenomena being studied. The term participant observation serves to recognize that participating and observing in a new context is always a form of compromise. Pure participation, on one hand, leaves no time for data collection and reflection, whereas pure observation, on the other, gives little insight into the insider's point of view. Instead, a compromise or back-and-forth movement between the two activities allows one to gain some perspective while also maintaining a measure of objectivity, as well as the ability to take notes, evaluate, and analyze. While I have mentioned some of the advantages and caveats of participant observation as compared to other methods such as interviews or focus groups, in practice such methods are often employed in parallel or even combined. A variety of different methods are used to benefit from their distinct advantages and obtain diverse perspectives in attempting to address the research question. For example, a study relying on participant observation will often include a set of interviews in a more formal setting, in addition to in-the-moment discussions that take place in the field. Conducting a walking or go-along interview while moving through a particular space is a specific example of a combined observation and interview method. In any case, different methods provide different viewpoints on the research question at hand, and multiple methods paint a more complete picture of social reality.